Hey everybody, you're all very welcome to Revenue Hacks this week with me, Christina Quigley, and the rest of our team. We're so excited because we have Lauren from the SPA Collaborative back with us again. And every time Lauren is with us, we always have a really insightful show. Just backstage, we were just talking about what we learned last time. And of course, we've got Sheila with us, who is the Gen Z question person and Gen XY. So happy about this. We're going to go around the room quickly and just say who we are so we can crack on with the show. So obviously, I'm Christina. I'm from Hoist Group. We've been Revenue Hacks for over a year and a half now. So Calvin. And tell us where you are, by the way, Calvin, because everyone needs to know where you are.
Well, right now I am in my hotel room in Dallas, Texas I'm here for the AHOACon conference, one of the biggest conferences in hospitality. Glenn Houseman is here, Rupesh is here, Sarah Dandashi is here. So, I'm here tagging along. I'll be collecting a lot of autographs this week.
I love how you've just name dropped pretty much everyone who does podcasts to do with hospitality in the US outside everyone.
Hanging out with the right crew, I guess.
Hanging out with the creme de la creme of hotel podcasts.
Exactly.
Great.
Stay tuned to the stories this week. I'll be taking a lot of shameless selfies. So, check me out on RevPar Media and in RevPar Ones. But Calvin Toloki, CEO of RevPar Media, your social media for hotels.
Rupesh is a very big fan of the show. We've actually been on his show in the past. We actually love Rupesh. Cool. So, hey, Rupe, if you're watching, we love him so much. Sheila.
Hi all, I'm Sheila Krishnan from SK Consultancy. We offer revenue management and commercial services for hotels in the UK and Europe. And I'm in lovely Twickenham hanging out with you guys. Not fancy like Calvin in Dallas, but
I'm not sure Dallas and fancy has ever really been put in the same sentence.
No, I can pretty much hear the whole rest of the USA right now going, oh.
Yeah.
And we know one football team is not America's team that's based there. Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lauren Maloney and I am the CEO of the SPA Collaborative. We're a global spa company that supports luxury hotels with spa concept creation, business development and training services. And our speciality is developing scalable branded hotel spa group concepts designed to be implemented multi-site and globally. And thank you for having me back. It's so great to be here again with everyone.
It's great to have you back, Lauren, because so much has changed in the spa world, and that's why we actually wanted you on the show. It's amazing how quick the spa world is evolving. We thought hotel technology evolves really, really quickly. The spa world has just taken off because of COVID, I think, really. People have just become very focused in the last year on their own personal wellness. But there's now a big shift and change in the mindset of staff wellness. Mm-hmm. And you actually just published a piece today on this, which I thought was very, very interesting. It's all about, the people who are giving wellness needs to be taken care of as well.
Absolutely. I think that wellness is really now an unignorable fact within the context of the lodging industry. And if we look back to late 2020, hospitalitynet.org reported some hot stats data that indicated that hotels that offer significant wellness offerings generate nearly 43% more in total revenue per available room on average compared with hotels with no wellness. So more and more, this sort of study illustrated that properties with extensive wellness operations benefited from a 20% higher ADR and generated 48% more in average revenue per room. room, compared with hotels with the minor wellness operation. So things that those of us who've been in hotels for years in luxury spa or spa, we've always known this, but there's never been investment in stats or data to really support it. And now it's really coming through. And I think one of the new things in the pandemic is exactly like you said, Christina, is this evolution that it's not just wellness for guests and for consumers. We're really looking to take into consideration the wellness of the practitioners and the folks within the spa delivering these services. So there's more parity. So it really is, the part that we play now is unignorable. We're seeing that investors are paying close attention to the impact of the wellness revolution on hospitality. And it's really backed by the emerging post-pandemic consumer trends that are already evident now.
And Lauren, what can you recommend to hotels to do to start really, or even properties that have spas attached to them, that they can actually start looking at the wellness of their teams? Because again, hotels think they're doing the best and employers think they're doing the best for their teams, but that's not necessarily always the right thing.
Absolutely. I think this is looking at this in the context of the pandemic, first of all, because some of these things are really quite low hanging fruit that even myself, I've been guilty of not always doing. But around the world, obviously we operate globally, and quite often people are really, really far from home. And so, we've all been, focused on just sort of getting through the day to day. But really, some of the most interesting conversations we have and what we're hearing are the most valuable conversations is really asking people and employees how they're doing and how their families are doing back home, because we're all obviously not seeing our friends and family. But when you work overseas or you're working away from your family, quite often what you're hearing is that people are feeling more distant than they ever have done before. So even just inquiring and acknowledging about people's family and their emotional well-being and how they're doing goes really sort of quite far to feel seen and acknowledged, because we're all struggling at the moment, aren't we, with this sort of deficit of not being able to have a life and do things. So I think really checking in, but genuinely checking in with employees and taking into account the context of their life and where they are and where their families are is a really important way to connect with people and really make them feel valued and seen, I think.
That really touches into, though, the post, that we've all been doing as well, is that we want people to be paid fairly, but treated fairly within the hospitality industry, because this is something that has really been pushed to the focus. We've all been saying this in the back end for years, but it's only really come to light since COVID, because people haven't been able to actually, employ people again.
Yeah, that's really true. And I know it's across the industry, but something that we're seeing in spas, it's really, really hard to hire people at the moment. There is such a huge recruitment crisis in our industry. And that is because you can be a kitchen porter and get paid the same as you can as a spa therapist, where you might go and do a 2 or 3 year qualification. This is a huge subject. Maybe it's a different conversation to have altogether about pay parity, but people don't stay in this industry because they can earn more working in another hotel department, not using the skills that they have trained to to be able to do these services. It's a challenge for us.
I'm glad that you spoke about this employment crisis, because I've been talking to one of my friends who's a spa director, actually, in a hotel in London. And she mentioned about, basically she was on Instagram Live recently. And she mentioned about, making sure, because there's not enough people. So sometimes they have to turn away bookings to be able to make sure that all the team are not overworked as well. So to be able to accommodate the booking, the spa treatments that has been booked, but at the same time, they finish on time. So they do have their own work-life balance. Now, what's your thoughts on this? Because, now Calvin, myself, Christina, we are from the revenue side. So anything to do with maximizing revenue, we are going to be pushing for it. But then we're having to turn away the business. So how do you think we can balance this out? Because there's an employment crisis there, which means we do not have all the therapists back to work, because some of them are away out of the country. So they're not necessarily back in the country. But at the same time, businesses are open, and wellness has been a huge focus. As Christina mentioned earlier, post-pandemic, everyone is looking into some kind of wellness retreat, wellness outing. So how do we find a solution to this?
It's a really tough one, and I'm not sure that anyone has found the answer, but I think at the moment what we're seeing is, and this is the first time, by the way, that we have had not enough resources in people as opposed to not enough resources in rooms. Normally you have potentially an excess number of therapists and you can yield your treatment rooms, but it's actually the facility that you don't have. So I think this is a bit of a new one. And I suppose, again, speaking to the colleagues in cities at the moment, there's a lot of people that even if they have come back to work, there's a lot of people going off sick. I spoke to a spa director in London last week, and she had 50% of her team call in sick legitimately. I mean, just to be honest, they were kind of proven cases. So it's really unpredictable and challenging to manage. Where we're seeing the most creativity, I suppose, and it's not the most ideal way to operate a spa, is having some of your other operations also supported by other departments. So borrowing from front of house where possible, so that if worst case scenario, the spa manager or spa leadership can step into treatments and step in at the last minute. But I think attracting people back to the industry, because there's so much frustrated demand, people who come into our industry are normally really passionate about what they do. They want to work. So we do see that people, will start coming back to their roles. But I think burnout is the next thing that we're going to experience with these therapists, because they're exhausted. We actually did a post last week about spa team burnout and how to manage it, because people are exhausted because there's this huge pent up demand, and there's definitely no shortage in demand. It's I'm not sure there's an absolute answer, really. I think it's just persevering, keeping on top of anticipatory recruitment, making sure that folks are trained. We're seeing less job hopping than we would have previously, especially in cities where people would, get trained and maybe move on in sort of 9 months to 12 months. I think how employers treated their employees during the pandemic has created a degree of loyalty. I think particularly in spas, I think people are happy to come back to what they consider a second family, really.
That's great to hear.
I really like how you say that, because that's exactly what it is. It is an extended family. And I think the world has changed right now, and people are so focused on different therapies and different treatments. It's no longer, a massage, and it's no longer a facial. So what are you seeing now, Lauren, as the trends within the industry? Because I know trends change based on generation as well, which is where Sheila shines, because she loves this generational shift.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm really happy you asked this, because I think the way that we normally look at trends is there's two sides of this from our side, I suppose. First, if we look at the immediate behavioural shifts, and then kind of blow it out to more sort of macro spa and wellness trends, and I'll explain why in a minute. But in a nutshell, like I said, there's no shortage of demand, and but there are really quite a lot of challenges to meeting that demand, again, which we'll touch on. The consumers that we're seeing returning to spas, these immediate behavioural shifts relate to how much people need compassion, touch, closeness, and sensory stimulation. And experiences need to be even more experiential, and not with frivolous luxury, but with meaningful interactions and moments. There's this really strong need to connect, feel, engage, and it really has to be a focus for spa teams in terms of delivering a spa experience in line with society's reaction to the pandemic. We're all really touch-starved. And something else we're seeing is people are using it to socialise and focus more significantly on self-care and their well-being. So I think this sort of immediacy of kind of returning to spas, there's huge waiting lists. You will talk about kind of provider utilisation, revenue per booked hour, which is an issue that we're having with some of the operational challenges. There's lots to talk about there. But generally speaking, there's a lot of people that maybe wouldn't have ordinarily been spa goers that are prioritising it. So those are sort of the immediate behavioural shifts. And some of the things, I suppose, from a larger sort of size across the wellness industry, we've already talked about mental well-being, and that's been defined as being worth $121 billion. And there's lots of different ways that you can integrate that into spas through mindfulness and breathing and meditation. And I think we're at the very beginning of that, and how that manifests on spa menus is going to be quite interesting. It's maybe not one to solve immediately, but it's certainly something to keep in mind in terms of what people are seeking. People are really talking about kind of their mental well-being. another one, which I know we talked about just previously, was also on the focus of the wellness for all. So wellness now is expected to serve a much wider community and serving a much more diverse society, in opposition to the quite elitist approach to well-being historically of entire communities really based on class, race and other differentiating factors. And really the reason that is a trend is, as we were chatting, the next decade is going to see this huge generational shift in wealth that we've never experienced. And as millennials and Generation Z inherit from their boomer parents, they're going to be the prized target market. And what's really important here is to embody and understand what's important to these folks, because they're the generations that have experienced recessions, pandemics, racism, sexism, gender pay gap being exposed, and the degradation of our planet. Their focus really is different, and this is the nugget here, that their values, they value protection over profit, and the wellness industry needs to reflect this in a sustainable ongoing offering. So no longer is wellness this elitist thing that people spend £10,000 to go to an extremely expensive wellness clinic. Generation Z expect their therapist to be as well as they are, and that's unignorable. We cannot ignore that that's going to be important to these generations. They don't want their wellness to be something that forfeits somebody else's. So just to finish up there, I know this is just the last one, because I know these annual trends, I just want to caveat this for anyone that's listening thinking, what does this mean for my spa? Annual trends do serve as a point of inspiration and a suggestion for direction, and it's a great kind of overview of the wellness landscape, but there are some takeaways that I can share that kind of bring this into what you can actually do in your spa and how you can create meaning behind these trends.
And I love.
Yeah.
So I just have one question. So obviously you've just touched on sustainability, and it's really important. But, are we starting to see a rise as well in people requesting vegan-friendly products, and that their spas are more sustainable, more conscious about the chemicals that they're using, or, the likes of palm oil or anything like that right now?
Oh, absolutely. And this is something that consumers are more informed than some skincare brands, I would argue. And I would encourage anyone who's watching this to touch base with the Sustainable Spa Association if you really want to kind of understand what it means to be accountable from a sustainability perspective in spas. But one of the things that we're seeing is that it's not just having the lovely labels to say vegan friendly, not tested on animals. People actually want to know the supply chain, like who was involved in making that product. Did it harm anybody? Like how far is it flown? It's all very well having this really beautiful organic product that was picked in the rice paddies of Bali, but in getting that to the UK or wherever you are in the world, has it brought any harm? So it's this level of accountability that they want to know. They want to have oversight over supply chains, which is something that's fascinating. So yes, that's not going away. That's only going to intensify.
So I want to touch on as Christina mentioned, like I'm a fan of this Gen X YZ. So and you kindly mentioned, Lauren, I mean, the trends are changing, the requirements are changing, and the newest generation, it's all about inclusivity, diversity, sustainability, whereas the previous older generations, they have more spending ability. The Gen Xers, the boomers, they like luxury, they like finer things, they want privacy. Whereas the millennials was more about to talk about. They were more of an Instagrammers generation. They want to show more outward. And the newer generation, it's like you say, sustainability, inclusivity, diversity. But at the same time, this generation is still young. They do not have the spending ability like we do, and this is where how can, talking from a hospitality perspective, how can hotels then tap into this newer generation? How can they maximize opportunity at the same time driving revenue from this market? I mean, what are the things that hoteliers need to look into now for future? It might not be immediately they could alter what they're providing, the treatments and everything, but is there something that they need to start building towards to cater to this newer generation?
Well, I really appreciate this question, because I think that all of these needs can be met in synergy. And I'm just thinking of one example to bring this to life, like a spa menu. So you can have your offering can meet the opulent requirements of boomers, or the kind of more outward Instagrammable, more showy behaviors, for example, of millennials, but then also synergize that with an offering that is kind of really honest and laid bare, and tells a story through the treatments that might appeal to Gen Z. So I think there's a way to underpin these offerings so they don't alienate anybody, but it's mindful generation of these tools. I'll give you one example. Whenever we sign off treatment menus, the background of the models that are included in the treatment menu is so often the same, and we really still have to point out to people that these people care about, we all should care about representation. And as soon as you say it to whoever's developing the menus, it's there, but there are ways, like those things are so highly visible to to the younger generation, and you can include that, and it's not going to be at the detriment of the other generations that are consuming services within your spa.
Yeah, I really like this, because now that you're talking about obviously price per hour and price per product and tech and whatever is there, when we're looking at pricing, do people how can people gauge their pricing right now? Because that's quite difficult. Bookings have been down, revenue has been down, the reopening of hospitality and hotels and spas and all that type of thing has been very much put on the back burner by the government, because it's never really seen as something that focuses on people's mental health, and people are trying to increase their revenues. So do you have any top tips on how to do that right now?
Yes,
based on these generational shifts, because what Gen Z or what my generation of millennials is going to pay is not the same as what an earlier generation is looking for to pay right now.
Yeah. Well, I think if we look at this at a kind of facility perspective and then an offering perspective, so they can be addressed slightly separately, the way that we cater to this in existing spas and also pipeline is actually the arrangement of spaces within the spa. And even if you have even if it's a fixed asset, you can still adjust things. And I'll give you a few examples. For the folks that want to kind of be seen places and want to celebrate and want to spend time together and make kind of memories for life, which tend to be sort of Gen Z and boomers, you can have spaces that naturally lend themselves to that, whether that's through day spas that have a celebratory element, that have a take-home gift, that maybe 2 nights stay with spa inbuilt. You can still have sort of quite celebratory, luxury, very Instagrammable experiences, again, without kind of alienating other folks. For the folks that are coming to spas for regeneration, restoration and calm, you can have quieter areas that are naturally lend themselves to that, where they can do mindful meditations. You can do kind of small library areas where they can relax and enhance their kind of knowledge and feed that kind of thirst for knowledge and understanding. So I think there's ways that you can adapt your operation again so that all of these people can coexist. And how this influences development is we're now kind of designing and building spas which are really clearly catered to this. So there's this sort of social celebratory aspect, and then there's areas that are very, very much sort of about retreating, sequestering, being away from people, and kind of calm, introverted spaces. But that if you're mindful of how to communicate your offering and what's available so that everybody feels like this is a place for them, I think again there's ways that you can communicate that so it feels that anyone who wants to come can come. And how that can come to life through your treatment menu, again, I suppose, relating to pricing, is that if you're looking for a more advanced treatment, you would expect to pay more for that. And so you can have your entry level 60-minute massage and facial is always going to be the best seller, no matter what market you're in. We draw.
Oh, we seem to have lost Lauren.
Yeah.
I'm sure she'll jump back in. But
okay.
I think what's really interesting is, it's touching on this whole marketing, to people when it comes to spa. Oh, here she is. She's coming back.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I disappeared.
It's okay. We know you were bored of us. It's fine. It's fine.
No, she had to pop off to get a quick service then. She excited talking about it.
There.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened there or where I disappeared to. But I was just talking about how you can have different levels to your menu, that the way that you can communicate it could be from a more advanced skincare line, or that it's from a more advanced therapist, so that will appeal to people who want to sort of spend the most on their spa experience, but you can still have your entry level services that don't alienate maybe a lower sort of ticket treatment for those younger folks.
I think what's really interesting is Julie Grieve is just after popping in. Hey, Julie. And she says, these folks are digital natives. They know how to search. They don't necessarily trust the first thing that they see, which is interesting. And probably why photos are so important, as per last week's chat, and must be true to reality. That is so true. I don't know how many times I've gone somewhere and I've seen this amazing picture of a hot tub, and then when you get there, it's not true.
Yeah,
it's really
absolutely.
Not true.
Yeah, or either there's no hot top whatsoever. That's actually something that came up in something that we were doing recently. And I think, touching on sort of, yield as well, and looking at how to kind of optimize things in the current circumstances. I'm sure everybody's aware that, all operations have been impacted. And in a nutshell, there's new hygiene protocols, there's edits to the guest journey and touch points. There's capacity limitations due to increasing the space of guest reservations. So even though we've got all this frustrated demand, we've got this challenge with resources, we also can't use the same amount of capacity that we used to, all of which in some way affected our ability to generate the same level of revenue from our daily resources. And looking at the fundamentals, the core of the spa model is that we sell time with therapists. So therapist utilization is an important KPI for spas ordinarily. And optimizing the schedule has been really disrupted by COVID secure operations. So each day we have this fixed number of hours, and the core objective is optimizing them with a carefully managed mix of treatments and duration. So everybody's experiencing this problem, but how different spas have responded has been fascinating. And I'd love to share some ideas and some best practice that we've seen out there of what people are doing. So in regions where there are the therapists on payroll, and I know, Calvin, maybe in the US this isn't kind of the same, but particularly in Europe, normally therapists are on payroll. So there's a lot more time where you can't generate revenue by booking this therapist. So it also means our revenue per booked hour has gone down. So there are a few ways we've seen spas recoup this lost revenue in some creative ways. And one of the first things that we've seen is, and Sheila, you actually asked about this, but it's actually about touchless treatments. That where there's budget, we're seeing more touchless treatments, where dead space or empty treatment rooms are being repurposed with touchless technologies. And a few examples that anyone can Google: halotherapy cabins, which is also really good for breathing and immune therapy. There are some great suppliers out there offering salt therapy. Hydromassage tables, vibrational and sound therapy tables, light pods that aid healing and recovery. And we've seen a couple of spas completely change their guest experience lineup to use spaces where they don't need a service provider. So that's definitely something I think to look at.
Lauren, so we talked about as you mentioned, about these underutilized spaces. So that could be meeting rooms in the, event spaces in the basement. So if they do not have like daylights, and they're not, when I say daylight, no windows or natural light, and there's not much of a request for meetings and events, can these spaces be turned into some of, like you mentioned earlier, like modular solutions?
Absolutely. And I think an idea that you came up with as well, Sheila, that we see ordinarily, it's been something that's been used in resorts, but for hotels that don't have large spas and maybe have a few treatment rooms, optimizing space elsewhere in the hotel is definitely an option. And what we've seen work really well is a calendar of visiting practitioners, where, again, these people aren't on payroll, but you qualify them as being expert in, sound therapy or yoga or some other therapy. And they're great for using underutilized spaces, and they're used to visiting multiple sites and still creating these really beautiful service environments. So I think there's definitely ways to bring wellness into the hotel experience, even if you don't have a very large footprint for the spa.
And how do you think they should market it? Should they market it as a spa treatments? Because the hotel might not have a actual spa; it's just treatment rooms. Now, as I mentioned, like one of these hotels, they have 3 treatment rooms, but they still call it a spa. But now we're talking about a hotel that doesn't have a spa. They might have a small fitness room, but they want to bring this wellness into the hotel as part of the package. So how should they promote it? Oh, and build it up with their packages?
I think one of the things, I mean, we hear wellness called all sorts of different things. And I think something that is quite appealing is, maybe focusing more on kind of well-being experiences. So something that is communicated around enhancing their hotel stay, as opposed to communicating something that is kind of a destination wellness retreat. And I think people who are looking for this sort of experience where they can, keep fit, enjoy movement. These are people that will be exercising and enjoying this sort of service, irrespective of whether there is a spa or not. These are people who value this sort of thing. So I think communicating it as part of the experience, having a couple of time options, making it clear whether it's a one-on-one service or a group service. I think those are all really valuable to get uptake, about really communicating it as a way to enhance their well-being during their stay.
And can you tell us a bit more about partnerships, wellness partnerships? How should hotel be looking into building partnerships, like, with wellness groups and providers? Do you think it would be beneficial for the hotels? I can't name any few, but then I'm just thinking that because there are so many wellness providers out there who might have a big name, do you think hotels should be partnering with these wellness providers or groups?
I think it's something that we do see. Matt Roberts has fantastic, fitness offering, the same for Stephen Price, SP and Co. We do see this successfully. So what that normally does come with is refitting a certain space. And I think that would depend on the sort of footprint of the spa and the hotel as to whether that would really be valuable in terms of investment. But we do see that successful in locations where you can really sort of lean into well-being. I think where we see wellness, it's a very broadly used term, and I think it means different things to different people. So I think communicating what your interpretation of the property is on well-being and wellness and spa and health is really important, because on one end you've got vitamin IV drips, and then on the other end you've got a few stones placed on the forehead. So I think it is really important to kind of communicate your position. And something that probably Calvin's familiar with is Forbes recently updated their standards, so that for spa, for example, so it's actually part of Forbes standards now that there's reference to wellness and well-being. So everybody's taking this really seriously. It's a case of there's still a lot of flexibility as to how you communicate what wellness is for your property.
I love how you mentioned the whole IV drips, because it was always something in the States. It was something quite luxury that the stars always availed of. You'd always hear after events, you'd always hear it, but I think it's quite interesting to see that it's now becoming a norm for people to start investing in this. Like here in Ireland, especially in Dublin, we've seen this pop up recently. How do you think it's going to be the new thing for wellness, especially for people that are, involved in sports, recreation, or are just party core people?
Well, that's how many people use it in actual fact, is sort of, travel recovery or,
hangover recovery.
And sometimes it's marketed as such. What we would say, and I've been in wellness, I suppose, involved in quite in-depth wellness concepts for over 10 years now. And I think one of the first ones that we saw in London, it was actually people, particularly luxury, and that's, I suppose, my background. So I think that maybe take it in the frame of that. But normally people have a place that they go to for that. So if they're going to a city, or if they're going to have a clinic that they have in mind to go for that. If you're a resort and you're looking to introduce that sort of thing, it would be worth going back to Sheila's point about having a big name like that. If you look at One and Only Group with Henry Chenot, you'd want to have a very kind of big wellness name behind it. So So there's a lot involved in, getting a needle into somebody's arms and inserting an IV drip. So, trying to recruit folks that want to work in a hotel context, but also do that we found it really challenging. So I think we treat that one with caution, I think, in terms of bringing that into the hotel context.
Well,
I think it's a
will
strange
say
one.
this. I mean, I had to smile when you guys brought this up because I have personal experience with this. Vegas, right? I mean, that's an obvious place. It's an obvious place for this to happen. So I stayed at a resort in Vegas a couple of years ago, and in the hotel they have this IV drip thing, and after a night of partying, it seemed like a good idea. And so I walk into the place and they ask me, well, how have you slept? Were you drinking? I'm like, of course I've been drinking. It's Vegas. Like, what do you think? Will you be drinking again tonight? Again, obviously. They said, okay, so they made a suggestion for me. And let me tell you, this thing took about half an hour or something like that to like fully get into my system. After about 45 minutes, I was like bouncing in a good way. I mean, I couldn't believe how good I felt after this thing. I get through the next night of partying, and then I went away for the weekend afterwards. I did that on about 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I was completely fine for that whole next day. I couldn't believe it. I know I can't maybe mention them on the show, but if you need an influencer, I'm in, because I swear by this stuff. That's it. It really, I mean, for being not only hungover but just tired from travel, jet lag. This thing was like spinach for Popeye. I immediately just was, let's go.
We have an advocate. That's so interesting to hear your experience.
I think that's really cool, because we are starting to see them take a huge kind of increase, and there's a lot more people now in Ireland starting to explore this type of wellness. We see sport influencers use these type of IV drips, ice baths, cryotherapy to actually be able to recover. And now people like myself, like as I said, I'm using different types of therapy, including cryotherapy, to recover from sports. And it's a different way of wellness. I'm not a person for relaxation. As I said backstage, I've started to do the floating baths. What did I call them? I can't remember.
Flotation tanks. Yeah.
Yes. And they open a whole different sphere that's hidden in the back of your head. It's just you in that tank with water, no phone, nothing, for an hour. And it's just so interesting to see, how your body reacts to it. It's not just your brain, it's switching off, but your whole body. You don't get out wrinkly like a prune. I'd like to point out I was very disappointed in that one. I kind of expected to come out looking like I was going to be 80. It's my thought of how to age gracefully. This is it. But it is quite interesting. We're seeing that rise as well, and salt caves are now starting to happen because people are becoming a lot more focused on their breathing, how they breathe. I don't really believe in salt caves. Sorry, Lauren. It's just not something I can. But you see, I don't have the need to be in one, but I have had friends who've had COVID and actually went to them and starting to kind of find that it is helping them in a way to be able to kind of recover their breathing or help their lungs. But that's also a side of wellness that people are now embracing. But can we talk about digital wellness? Because there is this whole thing of digital wellness. Do you think, Lauren, in the next 5 years or even 10 years, we're going to see a rise in, hotels or, spa wellness areas actually offering a full digital detox that, they take their phone away from you, they take everything away from you, and they teach you how to be more focused on yourself rather than be scrolling on Instagram, looking at the Instagrammers, looking at the influencers saying like, well, how skinny can I be like her?
Yeah, I mean, we actually see sort of two opposing sides of this. We definitely see digital detoxes being offered, and I think that definitely caters to a mindset when you're in that mindset to want that. I think the other thing that we need to keep an eye on for the next 5 years as well is people wanting to see more digitization of wellness services and integrating, their wellness technology into their treatments, into their guest journey within the spa, measuring their statistics, their vitals. So we actually sort of see it going one of sort of the same consumer essentially wanting different things at different times for their experience. And there's lots of firms exploring technology and how to integrate technology into the experience. And it's a really large it makes wellness mobile, essentially, that you can tap into these wearable diagnostic health trackers and sleep optimization, and potentially sharing that data and that knowledge with your therapist or spa service provider to tailor your treatment. So there's one side of it which is integrating more, and then there's this other side which is, like you said, locking your phone in a lead box and not getting it back for 3 days. So I think there's space for both. I think we're going to see more of both for sure.
I love you saying a lead box. I'm pretty certain if this phone went into a lead box, it would probably spontaneously combust. It wouldn't know how to cope with downtime. 100%. It just wouldn't know how to cope with it. But it is a case of, I do think that I think that's the next area that people will really start to focus on. I love it. Someone's just after saying there that for digital detox, hotels are calling it the slow traveler services. It is quite interesting to see that people want to do that. Every day you read about people leaving Twitter or leaving Instagram. They're putting up this post saying, I'm out of here for a few weeks. I need to recover. But, they could be switched off from one form of social media, but turned on to another. Yeah. And it's that constant, your brain is constantly going and churning, that you need to kind of separate yourself from. I do think it's something that people will look at.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a little delay on my side. No, I think it's about awareness too. I forget the name of the Netflix show that was out last year during the pandemic, but talking about social media and the impact. And once I watched that, and obviously as a guy who spends hours upon hours on social media, it was really eye opening, and it's this need for us to constantly get that dopamine hit, so you're constantly checking your phone. I don't know if you guys remember, like when you first maybe even had like a page, or you first got a phone, like sometimes you think you feel your hip vibrate and nothing happened, but it's like your brain is looking for it, right? Yeah. So once you're aware of these things, like once you're aware of, hey, why am I picking up my phone right now? Do I really need to do something, or am I just doing it out of habit? And it's like anything, it's awareness. And once you start to become more conscious of that, you can start to do that. So I've actually done it myself, like where if I find myself just aimlessly looking through the feed, I put the phone down. If I realize you've just gone through like 10 posts and I'm not even looking for anything, I'm not reading anything anymore, put it away, do something else. Even just like when you're having a meal, just trying not to have my phone nearby. It just sit and eat without looking or reading or scrolling anything. It's tough, but you have to be aware of the fact that you're doing these things out of just habit first, automated, before you can start to break it. Yeah.
It's interesting what you say as well, because I think
social dilemma. Yes, thank you, Bianca.
One of the concepts we're working on at the moment is actually about trying to assist people to live with technology, because what we're hearing in consumer insight and the consumer insight work that we do is that there's no escaping it. So you've got the digital detox, then you've got the kind of more digital integration, but it, like you're describing, Calvin, it's this presenteeism, and none of us can get away from this. So how do we live with it in a more healthy way? And that's something that we're actually currently researching, is what does that look like? How do you build that awareness? How do you build presenteeism and boundaries around technology to really harness it and use it in ways that are healthy without it being detrimental to your mental health? But if your mental health app is on your phone, what do you do? So there's these really kind of challenging dilemmas about how we use these tools and resources. So it's a very big subject, and one that can really help as well with the health trackers and sleep optimization. Right. But boundaries are important, aren't they?
I actually just discovered on my phone that there's a focus mode. So if you can turn that on for a set amount of time. So say you need to focus on work for the next hour, right? No distractions. You can focus on the only apps that will be able to send you notifications. So if it's just your phone, just your text because you're at work, so you want those to come through, or if you're taking that mental health time, it could just be your fitness app, your mindfulness app. Like I do meditation, that's on my phone too, right? So there's times I go to sit to meditate, and it's like Instagram pops up notification. Okay, let me check this first before I meditate. Right. Let me see what's going on Instagram. It's kind of it's kind of competing things, but again, knowing that those things are there and just being mindful of, okay, I'm taking this time for myself. Let me set up my phone so where I don't need to hear what's happening on Facebook or Twitter or anything. I'm just going to come in to meditate. I'm coming to listen to my audiobook or whatever it is.
I think that's really interesting because that's where I was going, because I actually at one stage I downloaded a sleep app to help me sleep when I suffer with insomnia, whatever, but it was on my phone. And if you have your tablet or you've got your iPad or you've got something else, it's on that, where everything else is there as well. So, you know, it kind of goes in a vicious circle. But I think what's interesting as well is that sleep apps aren't 100% accurate. They're not, you know, and I've used mine. No, they're not. I remember being in, going in for an operation last year, around this time last year, and I had to take my watch off. And I remember saying to them, no, let me leave my Garmin on. I want to know how many minutes sleep I get, because I didn't get any great sleep over the last week. And I remember the doctor actually saying it to me. But also when it comes to fitness, your fitness app isn't 100% accurate. I actually go to, I have regular VO2 tests, which is quite important for if you're an athlete or you're into sport, where it kind of tells you about your oxygen to body ratio and all this kind of, it's really cool. It's a fitness test essentially. But the guy actually was telling me about, you know, the different watches, because I have a Garmin, I'm a Garmin freak, but he actually went through all the ways through these algorithms aren't 100% correct. And he actually helps write the algorithms for systems for it to actually become correct. He's one of the most renowned people for all this kind of cool things. But I just thought it was really interesting. Like, we live, breathe, and eat by what our watch tells us. Let's be honest, you know, we all partake in the Apple challenges or the Garmin challenges, and then you see this is actually 100%. It's just a way of getting you going. It's like, wow, you kind of take stock, and it's the same thing with wellness with some people. You know, there's people like me who would never have gotten into it, that would never have been very focused on my own health and my mental health until lockdown. And now I've become a lot more aware of, you know, the triggers that happen or what brings on stress and anxiety. And, you know, I suffer with migraines that comes from stress. So I found ways to avoid them. And it's not just saying to everyone, leave me alone, but it's actually being able to, you know, like you said, focus on your own stress and your own well-being, being able to, you know, go for a spa day, being able to, you know, take in a walk or do something that's quite good. Because again, the owners or like people that I've worked with in the past or employers, they don't see the benefits in that. Whereas the staff now over the last year have seen the benefits, and that's where they're going to start focusing on a lot more. Like, we had a conversation last week. Does hotels and does desks really need to be 24 hours a day? Not really. With the age of technology, it doesn't have to be. You know, it's about being more focused on the consumer, on your client, just like what, you know, spa therapists have doing. You know, hotel teams are now going to become spa therapists, focus solely on that client for the 40 minutes or for the 10 minutes that they're there, so that they can give their best to the client.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so important. That's something that we can learn from spa. You know, we should actually get spa therapists in to teach everyone how to like just focus on what, because they do it so well though. You know, when a therapist goes into that room and they shut that door, it's just that client.
Yeah.
They're not concerned. A fire alarm could go off outside and they're not really concerned about it because they know it could be a test drill or whatever, you know, but they don't pay attention to the phone. They don't pay attention to anything. It's just the client. And I think that's one thing that, you know, hotel teams and employers can take away from spa therapists, is how they can just switch off from the world around them and just focus on that client for the 40 minutes.
I think that's a really good point, and it takes me back to my days of being a therapist. I started out in this industry as a therapist, and you work in your candlelit box for 8 hours a day, and you're not looking at cell phones, and it's dark, and all you're feeling in actual fact is a very sensorial experience of, you know, massaging somebody, feeling, you know, their stress and tension or whatever in their body, and you're really focused on what you're doing. So I would argue potentially that therapists quite often can be extremely mindful, because you have to be very present. You don't sort of drift off somewhere else. You're very present in what you're doing. So I think that's a nice point. Cross training.
I think it's really important though, for sure. And I just think it's that, I would never have really thought about it until now, when you're putting it into context and you're kind of going through it and you see how they differ to hotels. You know, they're a lot more relaxed, a lot more calm, and, you know, they don't show stress. Let's put it like that. They really rarely show stress. I think that's something that we can all, you know, take into stock for sure. But we are running out of time. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been amazing to have you on the show. Like
Thank
that.
you,
It's
Lauren.
actually 50 minutes. They just flew.
Thank you so much for having me.
You really did.
Oh,
And
it's
I
been
look forward to
amazing. I
having you
love
back
speaking
soon.
to all you guys. Thank you so much.
Lauren, it's always insightful when you're on the show. Last time I learned about billing for hours, and you would have thought I would have known that being a former revenue manager.
Oh, there's
So,
lots to share. Thank you so much.
if you want to check out Lauren, check her out on LinkedIn. And she's also under the SPA Collaborative as well on LinkedIn and on social media. Don't be afraid to reach out to her, ask her lots of questions. And if you've got any questions for her team, please don't be afraid to reach out to Sheila or to Calvin. We're always around. Thank you so much, Lauren. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Good night, Ivy.